Welcome to Living Out Loud with your host, Jess Phillips, where we talk all things addictions, codependency, relationships, and the good, bad, and ugly in between. Hi, everybody. My name is Jess Phillips. I'm super grateful you're here. I'm a master's level clinician and a relationship and attachment trauma coach. I help freedom-seeking women regain their confidence, master their triggers, and communicate their needs so they can finally put an end to toxic relationships, low self-worth, feeling like an imposter, and become more authentic, trusting, and secure. I know exactly what it feels like to be spinning in circles, stuck in obsession, and living life with all or nothing thinking. After years of failed relationships, impulsive decisions, yo-yo dieting, and riding emotional roller coasters, I knew I needed to get to the root of my issues and that I couldn't go on like this any longer. And that's exactly why I created the 10-week Secure Self-Coaching Program. I was tired of wasting time and money on professionals that didn't understand me. And I knew that trying to fix my own problems with the same thinking that got me there wasn't going to help me get any closer to my goals. If this sounds like you, feel free to send me a message and we'll set up a free consultation call to see if my program is right for you. You can find the link to my website in the show notes. Now back to the show. Enjoy. Welcome everyone to the Living Out Loud podcast with your host, Jess Phillips. Super excited to be back on the mic. So today we're going to be talking about the Anxious-Avoidant Dance. So last episode, I talked a lot about attachment styles, and all the feedback that I've been getting from that has been amazing so far. And sometimes I think I'm the only one that's interested in a lot of this stuff, but it's not actually true. So what I did last episode was really go through the 4 major umbrella types of attachment styles. So secure, anxious, avoidant, and my favorite, the one I suffered with for a long time, was a disorganized attachment. So a lot of that push and pull. And I think lately, a lot of my clients, a lot of my friends, and myself, quite frankly, in the past, either has been stuck in this anxious avoidant dance, or I have a lot of people in my life right now, professionally and personally, who are stuck in this anxious avoidant trap. So let's just break that down. What does that even mean? So an anxious avoidant dance would be 2 people in a relationship together where one person leans a little bit more anxious, either in their entire lives or when they're in conflict with someone, and with another partner who leans a little bit more avoidant. So a little cliff note, if you haven't listened to the last episode, go and listen to it. Maybe it'll make a lot more sense. But for time's sake, I won't break down the 2 attachment styles again. But let's just say one person, the avoidant, is very good at self-regulating. When they feel disturbed or anxious, they know how to run off by themselves, and they know how to calm themselves down, and that's how they solve problems. And for all my anxious friends, when we get triggered or we're in conflict, we don't really know how to co-regulate very well. We want to talk immediately, we want to communicate, we want to have the fight on the spot, and the avoidant partner is running for the hills. So why do these 2 people end up together? Well, chemistry. Chemistry and passion and dopamine and brain chemicals. So we don't often head towards what is good for us. We head towards what is familiar to us. So if any of you guys have ever heard like, oh, they ended up dating their dad or dating their mom, which, yeah, it sounds super creepy, but in essence, it's actually quite common. And why is that common? Again, just like how our attachment styles are developed, we only know what we know. So if I've grown up in a home where, let's say, both parents are quite emotionally avoidant, I'm not going to know some type of warm, fuzzy love. So as I get older, when I have the warm, fuzzy people coming near me, and a lot of people joke like, why am I attracted to the bad boys or the bad girls? And it's like, you're not, but you get the ick when someone is really emotionally available and wears their heart on their sleeve. And they're like, hey, I really like you. Can I take you out for dinner? And you're like, oh, no. And there's a reason for that, is because that's not the love that you were shown growing up.
So it's really why I try to like smash this idea of like something's wrong with you, or you're broken, or you're never going to survive in a relationship. And it has nothing to do with that. It's just a set of strategies that we become so just unconsciously accustomed to. We don't even realize that we're doing it. We don't realize we're doing it until we're in this anxious avoidant dance, and the conflict in the relationship has become so unmanageable and so unbearable that's usually when somebody kind of like tosses the flag or reaches out for help or says, Jess, I feel crazy in relationships, or I'm acting crazy, I'm snooping through their phone, I'm chasing them around. And I'm like, of course you are, right? Of course you are, because now that dance has started. So why does an anxious and an avoidant person connect at the beginning? Well, just like I said, it's familiar for both parties. So very rarely will two anxious people get together, because nobody likes to watch a mirror of themselves, right? Like, I don't know about anybody else, but when I was super anxious in the past, if anybody else was super anxious in front of me, I'd be like, oh, get a grip, like control yourself. It would be so embarrassing to me because I was watching myself. So what happens if I've grown up anxious with unavailable emotion in the home, when I start to date, there could be 10 people in front of me, 9 who are super available. I am going to be attracted to the 10th person who's making me work for it. Right? People who know how to hustle for love when they're younger, right? A kid shouldn't be tugging on mom or dad's shirt, or their primary caregivers, their grandparents, whatever it is, and asking to have them pay attention to their artwork or to their sports or whatever it is that they're into. Kids are supposed to feel safe and creative in whatever they're doing, but a lot of people don't grow up in those types of homes. So when we start to date, if all of a sudden my kind of spidey senses go off and I'm like, oh, wow, look at that person who's not paying that much attention to me, but I know they're still kind of into me. And it's like this like beast awakens inside. And I mean, physiologically, neurologically, I can do a whole separate episode on what's firing inside, right? So some people who struggle with depression or anxiety or ADHD, right, we're lower on the dopamine scale. So that alone can explain a lot of the times, like people are always very surprised, like, why are you staying with this person if they're so bad to you or you're so unhappy in the relationship? And it's like, addiction. It feels really good, right? It feels really good when we get what we want. It feels really bad when they pull away, but then when they start to breadcrumb their way back and they give us little bits at a time, we're like, we're okay again, safety, more safety. And then we get them back, and then the same behavior starts, and then they start to pull away again. And that becomes such an addictive cycle, whether you're low on the dopamine scale or not. So that alone could explain, I'd say 50% of the dance, but it's really this idea of these childhood wounds that come out to play, right? So a lot of anxious leaning people can really struggle with codependency. Even if they don't know, a lot of people can have this kind of savior complex where they meet somebody who's more avoidant, and maybe they're struggling in their lives, the avoidant, who knows, maybe they have a drinking, drug, gambling problem, you name it, and the anxious attacher can swoop in and be like, I'm here. I'm going to save you. Let's do this. And it actually feels really good at first, because the anxious person needs to be wanted and needed and needs to feel useful. And the avoidant person is like, oh, wow, here is this person who cares so much about me. Now, avoidants grow up in a different type of home. So there's a reason that they become very, very self-sufficient and independent, is because there was probably a lot of rejection in the home. Could be very self-centered parents who were just very busy doing their own thing. Could be physically violent primary caregivers. And the child learns that when they have an emotion to express, or when they're experiencing something, don't go to the parents about it, because every time they've tried, maybe they were rejected, maybe they were made fun of, ignored, whatever it is. So as a kid, they learn like, hey, adults aren't safe. People aren't safe to handle my emotions. I'm going to deal with my own emotions. So they learn, and Yes, frankly, it's a good skill to have in a lot of ways, but they learn to be hyper independent. So now as they get older, here comes this kind of anxious superhero that comes to swoop in. And the tricky thing about anxious attachers is that they don't have the same, and I'll put self-esteem in air quotes, because the avoidant person looks very confident when you first meet them. They don't need anything from anyone. They're very self-sufficient. They're doing their own thing. And the biggest difference between an anxious person and an avoidant person is that an anxious person will hide who they are so that you like them. An avoidant person doesn't do that. And that's what seems really sexy to the anxious person. They're like, wow, look at these boundaries. They just put themselves first. They do whatever they want, right? And yeah, it can look quite sexy and charming at first, but more often than not, it falls into the narcissism scale. And that's another huge problematic piece once the dance starts to happen. So essentially what happens, these two types of people meet. It's like fireworks at the beginning. Everything is going off. It could be very lustful, very passionate, because the anxious person also is on their best behavior at the beginning. And they're like, I'm going to give this person everything they need. And the tricky thing about avoidance is that they're takers, right? And an anxious person is a giver. And the anxious person thinks, okay, I'm going to give a lot to this person in need who doesn't seem to ask me for anything, very self-sufficient. They kind of chill on their own. And the anxious person starts to kick in and they're like, okay, what can I do for them? What can I bring to the relationship? How can I pretend to be confident and self-sufficient too so that I can land this relationship? And the problem is that a lot of the times when we hide ourselves at the beginning of relationships is that we have motives. We have expectations. So I'm not just this, well, maybe I'm a little better at it today, but I'm not this just like altruistic giver where I'm like, I'm just going to selflessly give and give and give and give and give. And it's like, If you're given that much, you are waiting for the day that avoidant taker turns into a giver. And that day never comes. Never comes. The only time that day is going to come is if you see this person, usually through a breakup or some come to Jesus moment, or maybe they went to rehab and they're going to change their whole lives. But besides deep-rooted therapy or coaching and work being done on this, that avoidant person is never going to turn into the person that you want. But people stay so stuck in this dynamic. And I often share with clients, and I give them this analogy. It's like a gambling addict sitting at the machine, right? I used to do it when I was drinking and using. If I have invested $500, I am not walking away from that machine. Just give me 10 more minutes, 20 more minutes, half an hour more. Let me just put in $100 more. I can't walk away after I've invested this much. And it's the exact same thing that happens in relationships, right? Because then the anxious person starts to try to solve the problem, because and the scary thing is that the honeymoon stage, it doesn't even normally last that long. So I work with a lot of people and we go through a timeline and I say, okay, tell me how long this person acted as the person you needed them to act. And they stop and they think, or they go home and they journal about it. And I always hear about the same timeline. 3 months, 6 months max if they're like a professional. And after that, the gig is up. Because once the passion has worn off, what happens is the anxious person now has to take off the cape. And they say, okay, I'm ready for you to start giving to me now in this relationship. I've saved you. I've gone through your drinking spells. I've lent you money. I've paid for everything. I've cleaned the house. I've kept up everything to support you through plug in A, B, or C. And now I'm ready for you to show up in this relationship. And the avoidant panics. They're like, what? That's not happening. And the worst part of all of this, and this took me years to learn, and it breaks my heart when I watch other people go through it now, is the anxious person now thinks this avoidant partner won't change because they're not good enough. And this is what creates an even deeper cycle of trauma. So they start to try harder. If I was only good looking enough, if I was only this enough, I know that if I break up with them and I leave, I love this one. I love this one. They're going to leave, and in the next relationship that they get into, they're going to do all of the things that I wanted them to do so badly in our relationship. And I'm like, honey, that's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. They might do it again, 3 months, 6 months. I'll even give them 9 months. But this is all surface. Unless these patterns and these strategies and these core wounds, unless these change from a fundamental level, this person is just going to rinse and repeat. And it's just another excuse and another reason that keeps us locked in these very, very, very unhealthy dynamics. So what tends to happen? These two get together, it's fireworks at first, because the anxious person is also they get to feel really important in this relationship. And don't forget, anxious people have low self-esteem, right? They've been put down a lot in childhood, or they just felt like they could never live up to their parents' expectations. So they become these perfectionists. And now that they're in this relationship, they really, really try so hard. And at the beginning, when things are going well, they feel really important to this more avoidant person. Or the avoidant can make them feel so special, right? And that's where we get into love bombing. I can do a whole separate episode on love bombing, but that in itself is very addictive and it's quite euphoric. So if you take someone who maybe feels like a 5 on 10 about themselves and you start making them feel so special, of course they're going to get hooked. So now these two people are locked into what I call this trauma bond, right? So the anxious person has essentially lied about who they are and what they need, and not in a malicious way. Who wants to admit that they're insecure and that they have needs in a relationship? And the avoidant person is also lying in a way because they're like, I'm going to suck you dry and leave at the end. And they pretend like they're these like really great people and that they know how to communicate, but they absolutely don't. So after this dance wears off, what tends to happen is the avoidance starts to pull back just ever so slowly, right? The hype of the relationship has worn down. Things like work can start to take a lot more importance, right? Any avoidant person that I've worked with or dealt with in the past, that's one thing that you'll see with them. They're workaholics because that's their comfort zone. And a lot of them are entrepreneurs. A lot of them are running the show. Nobody's calling them out on anything, and they get to control the whole situation. So they'll start businesses, whatever it is, and then they'll start working more. And then the anxious person will start to express needs to them. Hey, what happened to, they're not going to say love bombing, but what happened to all the dates we used to go on? Or what happened to staying on the couch and watching movies every night? And now the avoidant person, since the love bombing is worn off and they're back onto other things, starts to pull away slowly. And that's where the anxiety comes up for people. And someone who is a little bit more securely attached or has a higher sense of self-esteem probably wouldn't be dating a shutdown avoidant in the first place, but say they wouldn't be getting as triggered as an anxious person with low self-esteem does in that moment. That is one of the worst feelings. It feels like your world is just like slipping out under your feet. You're very confused. You thought you had this amazing, beautiful relationship, and now all of a sudden, are they cheating? Are they interested in something else or someone else? Am I not good enough? Am I not doing enough? And they just start to spiral. And more often than not, they don't say like, hey, because a lot of people don't even know what's happening at that time. They don't say like, oh, let me go book a session with my attachment trauma therapist. They start to pull out strategies from their hat and they try everything. Let's book a trip. Let's move in together. I love this one. Let's move in together. That'll solve things. And I'm like, oh God, let's get married. Let's get engaged. I'm like, oh dear God. Right? So I'm just watching these things and I understand it. I understand the strategy is don't disconnect from me. Because to an anxious person, the threat of disconnection is one of the worst things that you can do to them. So they're saying to themselves, okay, what's going to keep this person around? So then it's move in, engagement, marriage, let's buy a house together. And then we all know what's next. Let's have children together. That'll solve it. Right? And now we're even in a larger cycle. And now we're talking about generational trauma. Because now what are these two people who don't know enough about themselves at this point, don't know how to communicate, don't know how to co-regulate, and now there's a third person in the home. And now they pass all of this on to their child. And it's really devastating, and nobody does this on purpose. I've never seen anybody being like, yeah, I'm just gonna stay in my attachment wounds and cause this big chaos. When you're in it, and when you're in love, in air quotes, the blinders are on. All your friends can see it. All your friends are like, holy shit, this is a disaster waiting to happen, but you can't see it. I couldn't see it. I was locked in one of the most unavailable situations imaginable. And my God, was I just pulling tricks out of my hat. Maybe if I do this, maybe if this, maybe if I lose weight, maybe if I, whatever it is, and I'm just anything to avoid looking at that core wound. So, what tends to happen is this blow up. And this is the blow up. This is the fork in the road that I like to call it, because now we have a decision to make. So the decisions are, okay, here we are, we're in this dance. Do I now go down path A, where I try to continuously connect through all of the options that I just ran through? Or B, do I pause and say, okay, what's going on here? I'm not happy right now. You're not happy right now, because then the anxious and avoidant, they start to go at it. All of the things that the anxious person said that they were okay with in the beginning of the relationship, they're no longer okay with, because they had all of those hidden motives and all of those hidden expectations. So now, the person who was so giving and yeah, for sure, you have to work late, no problem. Yeah, you're going out with your friends, no problem. Now it's a problem. So now the avoidance, like, this is where you start to hear it, like, hey, get off my back. Or, hey, why are you always nagging? Why, and then they start calling you needy. What's going on? You need so much connection. You need this. And that's the most hurtful part of all of this. And it's like, no, you're not needy, but you did hide all of your needs at the beginning of the relationship. And that's why it's so important to learn to process all of this trauma first, but learn to date authentically and learn to date with intention. It's just like saving money or going for a goal. You don't just go in blind and I'm like, well, I don't know what I make and I don't know what's coming in, but I do want to save money. And it's like, how much money do you want to save? What's coming in? What's going out? What's your budget? A lot of people don't do that with dating. And again, that goes down to an even deeper wound. It's because people don't believe that they can actually get what they want. They don't believe that somebody out there is going to love them for who they truly are. So they just put on a million masks and they just keep replaying this trauma wound over and over and over again. So, and this isn't an advice episode. This is really to just paint a picture, and hopefully a reassuring picture if you are in it. It's one of the most difficult dances to be in. And like I said earlier, mine had to end when it had to end, and I had to go through enough pain and heartache. And I work with some people who will just continue down that path despite knowing that little voice inside that has probably been there since the entire beginning of the relationship that's gnawing at you saying like, I don't think this is a great idea. and anxious people just ignore that voice, right? So I don't know what it's going to take for each person to get out of that dance, but trust your gut. If your gut is saying, I think they're lying, I can safely guarantee that you're right. If you feel like something is off, you're not delusional. Something's probably off. The tricky thing is that we never take a moment to say, wait a minute, who were they at the very beginning? Because like I said at the beginning of this podcast, avoidant people don't hide who they are really. They put themselves first, they put their hobbies first, they put this first. It's the anxious person's issue at the beginning because they think they're gonna change them. Or they think that the more they fall in love with the anxious person, the more time they're gonna spend with them. But it's like, avoidance, look out for number one in the beginning. So it's so important to reflect back at the beginning of the relationship. Who were they then? And focus on that because they are not changing that much. I spoke to somebody yesterday and he was saying, like, I've really changed. I've radically changed. How come, is it silly to have hope that this other person won't change? And I said, it's not silly to have hope that the other person won't change, but let me reflect back to you how much work you've put into your healing in over 5 years. A lot of work, a lot of therapy, a lot of insight. We can't expect somebody to miraculously change if they're not even, most avoidants don't even know that there's anything wrong because they're very happy living at the surface level. They don't want to go deep. They don't want to have deep, intense connections because that was never safe to them growing up. So the anxious person who thrives off of those types of connections is waiting for this avoidant person to slowly open up, and they'll get little crumbs of it. And my God, does that crumb keep them hooked for months or years? It did for me. I'd have this and that's the thing, I'd have this huge fight, right, with an ex, and then we would reconnect, and the reconnection was like a drug for me. It was like, oh my God, they finally understand me. They know I've proved to them how self-centered they are. Now they're really gonna change. And yeah, it's great for, I don't know, a couple of weeks, and then it goes right back to status quo. So if you're stuck in this cycle, just take a step back, pause. It's very hard to fix something while you're in it. I couldn't figure out my cocaine problem and still continue to do cocaine. It wouldn't have worked. As much as I would have liked that to work, it was not going to work. We need clarity. We need to step away, and instead of focusing or hyper focusing on their behavior, because that's what anxious people do, let me just watch all of your moves. Are they in a bad mood? They didn't eat dinner tonight. What does that mean, right? We become very obsessed. Instead of doing that, turn the mirror towards yourself. Ask yourself what you saw at the beginning of the relationship. Ask yourself who they were. And then ask yourself, is this person really capable of changing? Are my needs getting met in this relationship? What are my needs? A lot of people don't even know their needs before dating. That's another disaster waiting to happen. And then all of a sudden, you're just going to hyper focus on what the avoidant person says to you. You're so needy, you're so this, you're so that. And we're like, yeah, we are. And then we just feel like shit about ourselves and probably go self-sabotage or hurt ourselves in some type of way. So try to avoid looking as hard as it is, because you're probably very stuck in obsession right now. If you're in this anxious avoidant trap, as hard as it is, just take the time alone to really reflect and just look at the evidence. If you have 2 years of evidence of this person behaving the same, I can safely say to you right now, this person is nowhere near going to change. If you have 10 years of evidence, I've had people tell me they knew they were doing the wrong thing walking down the aisle. Right? And now you have 40 years of evidence. And just keep asking yourself, how much more money do I want to put in the machine? And walking away is flipping hard, and you're gonna feel like you're drowning. I've been there, and you're gonna obsess, and you're gonna feel like maybe I should have given it one more shot, or maybe we should get back together. But again, it's what's in front of me, what's the reality versus what's the fantasy. I love fantasy. I love to fantasize about things. But I have to ask myself, Jess, what's in front of you? Just what's actually in your bank account? Just what's going on? Because me living 2 years ahead of time on the beach somewhere it's not really helpful for my today problem sometimes. So if you're stuck in this trap, first of all, I know how you feel. It's horrible. You're going to get through it, right? And just take some time to think about how much more you want to invest, because life goes by. And I know I sound like an old lady saying this, and old people used to say this to me all the time, but they're like, honey, your life is going to fly by. And I'm like, okay, geezer. And my 20s were like low and slow. 20s, I don't know. Time didn't feel like it was zipping by. And now I'm in my late 30s. I don't even know how that freaking happened. And I don't want to give another avoidant 5 more years of my life, 10 more years of my life. A giver needs to be with another giver. And just remember that. If you're with a taker, I can guarantee you this taker is probably not going to turn into a giver unless you see a lot of work happening. And a lot of people ask me that. Can an anxious and an avoidant person be okay together? Essentially, a rule of thumb at the end of the day, an avoidant is going to do very well with a person who has low needs. Any anxious person, including myself, we're not super low on the needs scale because we're passionate people. We like things, we like people, we like conversations, we like to help out, we like a lot, right? So an avoidant will do well with someone who maybe is a little bit quieter, keeps to themselves, doesn't really ask for much. Essentially somebody who probably stays a little bit more on the surface. And if there's somewhere where anxious people are not, is on the surface. So, going forward, it's if you're with an avoidant, if you're married to an avoidant, if you're in a relationship where you just cannot get out, it can work, but it is so important, and not necessarily couples therapy work because that's just damage control. It's 2 separate healing paths. Individual therapy, individual coaching, do your own work, and then come back together. And yes, that's for sure possible. But at the end of the day, if I were to have some advice or a suggestion is, if you're anxious, I wouldn't go near a shutdown. Avoid it, even if they had $1 million in a briefcase. Anyways, I love you guys. I hope this was helpful. Be sure to tune in next week for another fun, juicy episode.
Thanks everyone for listening and supporting Living Out Loud. Be sure to tune in next week for another fun, juicy episode.